Well, back at CCHS in high school, a freshman year, we had to do a history project.
Yeah.
That year I did it on the Hunley House, murder.
Ooh,
Yeah.
good one that we can...
And so I did that freshman year. And then for sophomore year, I wanted to it was just a written paper. I wanted to take it in another dimension and actually kind of build a model of something. And then I literally just learned about Buckminster Fuller by my sophomore year, which was, I guess, about 1983 or so. And at that time, it was a rental. And so I went there, met the renters, and they allowed me in to take measurements of everything.
Yeah.
And so over about a 2 or 3 month period, primarily listening to the Cars for some reason. That was the Cars, who are an amazing band, of course. But I just remember just listening to them throughout this 2-month process of building a scale model of the geodesic dome. And I cut out like 5,000 individual pieces of sandpaper for the shingling, and it was a really sweet piece of work. It won its state that year, and that was for Mrs. Grimmer. And then I went on the next 2 years and did group performances for Mrs. Grimmer's honors history class, and we took those both years to nationals and stuff. And that's something that CCS just kind of always did. And there was a lot of areas where folks would really have an opportunity to excel, even though we're kind of down here, an oasis in a land of Hickdom, if you will, here in Carbondale.
Do you feel like you purposely stumbled, came across Buckminster Fuller?
Well, I couldn't believe that I wasn't aware of that before that. And then just how significant it was, and how, there were over 1 million of these structures around, planet Earth. And
really?
And at this point, yeah. And here he was, a resident of Carbondale and an SIU professor, and actually, lived in one of his own dome homes. Though it was interesting, as you probably have heard by now, the dome home that he lived in was a kit made by a company called Peace, P-E-A-S-E dome. And so it was kind of a result of him licensing his design out to other folks, and then actually purchasing one of those kits. And actually, the dome on the lake, Bucky's Haven, is the exact same kit as the one that they used to build the house.
Really?
Yeah. And it was built by Ira Parrish, and that actually...
It seems like Bucky's Haven is so much bigger than the house.
Well, because you have the open walls around it.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. And that was actually built in 64. It went up that early, with the Fuller Dome going up in 61, and then Bucky's Haven went up as early as 64. Yeah, but was also put up by Ira Parrish, who passed a couple of years ago at age 100.
Wow.
Yeah. And Parish Acres was his creation, over by Parish School and all that. That's all his namesake.
Really?
Yeah.
That's also that's another one to think through. Is like I definitely need to dig into the parish legacy in town. I've rented from Greg, right? Greg's the brother that owns Eastgate.
Oh, okay.
I think. I don't know. I've rented from him before. So I mean, I know he's accessible, and just he talks like, I'm sure I could sit him down. He would tell me all about the New Era Dairy and
great
the development
stories.
of town.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, especially a lot of stuff from my childhood. I was born in 68, actually about 200 feet south of here, in Holden Hospital. And I grew up here in the 70s and the 80s for a couple years.
Well, let me do an intro for the WTF Carbondale podcast, where we talk to interesting people about their interesting lives and tie it all back together to this little old place we call home, Carbondale, Illinois. Episode 70. Brent Ritzel, the man that knows the introduction because he fanboys out on the old podcast. I appreciate that, sir. This is the kind of podcast that if there are people that this is made for, it's people like you and myself and MK on the previous podcast who are just Carbondale files, right? And just absorb everything that is this place and its history and its prospective future and yada, yada, yada. I don't need to get all mushy-gushy. I do that plenty.
One often are accused of having an inordinate enthusiasm about Carbondale.
That is, Yeah, it's you put it kinder than my wife does, but correct.
That's what I'm here for.
So the we were talking before the podcast, the not so much on your coming of age story in Carbondale start off with, but starting with your parents' story and how they came to be
Oh, yeah.
in Carbondale. What brought them here?
Well, they both were SIU students, 1961, from different sides of the river. My dad from Valmeyer, Illinois. My mom from Arnold, Missouri. And they met as freshmen. Actually, they had mutual friends, and they were driving up to St. Louis for some kind of show. And my mom had to sit on my dad's lap for those couple hours, and that's how they met.
Yeah. No better way to get acquainted than to be physically in each other's breath space for 3 hours. And then if you can deal with it that long, I guess there's a lifetime to come.
And of course, my dad wanted to go study that first summer. My mom's like, not yet. And so, but anyway, they got together, got married right after college. They had my brother soon after their wedding. And then I was conceived over on Park Street, probably where Primo's is at now, somewhere around
nice.
there.
Somewhere around where the putt golf used to be.
Yeah, right behind there.
yeah.
Exactly. And also, we were one of the very first families to move into Evergreen Terrace.
Yeah.
We
Really?
Yeah, we were in Building 1, Unit 2, and we were among the very first. We were on the wait list, and then when it opened, we moved in, and all I remember is playing in the dirt. That's what I did my first 2 years, was playing the dirt a lot. Evergreen Terrace, yeah.
Oh, that's phenomenal, man. That makes me. Do you know, like, what the growth of the physical place was like at the time for the construction of that housing? I mean, how long? I mean, did you guys live in there for a while, or was it just like?
We lived there for 2 years,
Okay.
and then my dad, who was an SIU professor, they kept on giving him degrees and jobs, so he had no reason to leave. And,
Can't argue with that, right?
and by then, he was a professor in the Department of Health Education and Safety. He created the Safety Center where they teach motorcycle driving.
That's phenomenal.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would like to talk to him about what we can do about motorcycle safety in Carbondale, because I think we with all like the mini bike traffic and all that stuff right now, like just to do workshops for people, like, listen, it's clear that we're not going to police it super hard, and we probably don't need to, but like we probably need to provide people some level of understanding of like what it is to operate small class, like under 50 cc vehicles, and like what the safety things to go along with that can be, so we can avoid issues with that being prevalent as it is. If small towns around here can have like the UTVs on the streets and whatever, I'm sure we can adapt to this thing. Right?
Well, driving a motorcycle is 10 times more dangerous than a vehicle. Folks aren't looking for motorcycles. And the interesting thing about the Safety Center was that it's the only building in SIU history that was actually built by SIU staff. And it was funded with research overhead. It wasn't funded with any student money at all. So that was the way they developed it economically was kind of interesting.
So the whole facility was not just like outright, hey, we're going to provide safety courses and that's that, but like there's a research component to it.
Oh yeah, always. If it's a university, there's a research.
There's got to be a
component.
research. What do you have more context on kind of what that looks like?
You know what? Not particularly.
Okay. Right.
Yeah. That's a little bit beyond my. Yeah.
I'll have to pull him in for this story. Then
absolutely.
You're on notice, Dad.
Yeah. Try and get him to stop talking. Yeah.
Well, hey, no, that's exactly what I need. The people that talk the most on this podcast are the best kind of guests, because I don't need to do as much talking as I do on these podcasts half the time.
Agreed. No.
Hey, I appreciate that. Hey, you gotta to take that criticism from the fans, right? And if you're the fan and you're the guest and you're saying, just relax, Nathan, like it's okay, I can do some talking. Like, I follow you, my friend. I follow you. So what was your did you go straight, like, did you just have like one childhood home growing up after that then, or
when I was 2 years old, we moved out by the Humane Shelter.
Okay.
In between Carbondale and Murfreesboro, a couple miles west of Carbondale, where every Friday night we're treated to the screaming of the dogs as they were being euthanasia.
No.
Yeah, so that's one weird.
It's a memory, though, man.
It's a huge memory of my childhood. Is every Friday night there would just be the howling of the dogs.
Oh man,
yeah,
that's tough. I'm want to move on from that subject because I wasn't ready for it.
One quick note on the Humane Society.
Yeah, please.
Most people drop off their pets near the Humane Society, assuming that they're going to find their way there, rather than actually taking them in. And I'm just going to recommend people, don't drop your pets. Just take them in there. Don't drop them off nearby.
Yeah.
Because then it just, we have a real feral cat situation and things like that.
Yeah.
So
no, that's very reasonable. I appreciate the public service announcement aspect to that. I think that's important.
Yeah.
Man, well, so did you go to school at SIU as well? Were you a local, like, stayed in town for college?
No.
I was.
I definitely had no intention of sticking around. And when people ask me, well, why didn't you go to SIU? I was like, because I was born and raised in Carbondale.
Yeah. Like you got that part of the education in high school.
Well, I grew up at SIU.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. I mean, in junior high, I spent every weekend in the basement of Morris Library looking through microfiche concerning the 1930 baseball season.
Really?
Well, yeah, that was the only year the National League averaged 300 as a whole, and so I was actually transcribing every single box score. I was going to write a book about it as a junior high kid.
Really?
Yeah, I was fascinated by that. Yeah.
Are you a big fan of Pete Peterson's Reading Baseball on WSIU? Then do you listen?
Actually, I'm not familiar with that specifically. Yeah.
Oh man, I'm gonna have to introduce you to that. Just like he does it. I don't know if it's weekly or every couple weeks or if it's on season or off season, but he's just a local guy who's had engagement with professional baseball in different ways.
Oh, I should check it out.
He's got to be like probably in his 80s or something like that. The guy writes books and yada yada yada. But no, just were you like always interested in baseball, or was it just this particular statistical facet?
Well, my nickname in junior high was the Stat Man.
Nice.
Because when for any kind of intramurals, softball, basketball, or football, I would actually kind of have a little quarter page, like while playing, I was keeping track of stats. Like even during basketball games, I would, I would keep track of what everyone was scoring. And stuff. It was just something that always appealed to me. I think numbers have always been like poetry to me.
Nice.
And I tend to think in that sort of way, and that's why I started off as a physics major in college and stuff like that, because numbers were always poetry, I guess.
Did you carry on with math stuff, or were you like, did you touch your toes into physics and were like, maybe a different direction?
Well, I was full in. My plan, like any other kid, was to grow up to be a high energy particle physicist.
And the typical.
Yeah. And so at sophomore year in college, my work study job was actually helping to build experimental apparatus for Fermilab. But then I took a philosophy course. And there was this existentialist named Kierkegaard that I seemed to be able to explain, whereas our grad student couldn't. And he actually, one of my first experiences in philosophy class was him asking me to come up and teach the class.
Wow.
And so I'm like, oh, okay, this is how I think already. And so I'm like, this is much easier. There's not 8 hours of practice sets every night. I had time to learn how to play musical instruments when I became a philosophy major, because suddenly 30 hours of commitments a week disappeared.
So did you pursue activity in higher education with philosophy activity, or like what? That
was part of the vision. I always saw myself getting a PhD and becoming a professor, because that's what my dad did here. I did a year of grad school at Loyola, and I found I didn't really like the other grad students. They seemed to be kind of not have any morals or ethics.
Really?
Anywhere in the mix. And I had an incredible professor that I got to work with, Hans Siegfried, who's since passed, but just was a really huge Nietzsche scholar, and so I was able to do a lot of really good work in relation to Nietzsche, and existentialism and phenomenology were always my foci. But I did a year of grad school, and then I just kind of realized, this was the reality. There was no job openings. We were all waiting for someone to die somewhere, and they would people would get excited about a letter from West Texas Women's Teachers College. About a position, and it just like there just was such slim pickings. And also I kind of realized those two disciplines I had chosen, physics and philosophy, really to perform at the highest level require really high IQs, in the 170s and stuff, and I'm a couple standard deviations below that, which is still pretty good, but not for those fields.
Yeah.
Not,
like you're commonly smart, not like uncommonly smart.
Yeah. Just, not top 1/10 of 1%.
Yeah.
No. And so that was actually something I realized, that I was always kind of trying to play above my pay grade, when, but anyway, I guess that's what led me into entrepreneurism.
Yeah. I mean, is that what you kind of worked through before coming home, was just business startup activity?
Well, that was kind of the weird thing about growing up in Carbondale as a professor's kid. I didn't know that I could own a business.
Yeah.
I literally thought that your last name had to be Budslick or Carrianis to own a business in Carbondale.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of what I grew up with. And then, so I went to college, and I got involved with music because I became a philosophy major and had the time to do so. And then I learned that you could go to a studio, pay them some money, record your own music, that you could go to manufacturing facilities, have them press your records, and that you could do all these things yourself. And so really my first business was a couple of record labels just coming out of college.
Really?
Yeah.
That's cool.
And I started with bands that my band played with, and then I kind of got out of bands for a while and just had a couple record labels that each had 8 bands on it. Happy Tales Records and Crank Records. It was a pretty amazing, 3 or 4 years there.
Were you able to make a living and eat off of that activity?
Just barely.
Barely.
Hey, but I did.
Barely is still a yes.
Exactly. And also they were run very cooperatively. And really what I was doing was a lot of entrepreneurial training of all the bands, teaching them how to manage their own bands. And also, my first 2 years out of college, while I was doing that, was as a psychiatric technician at a mental health care facility up in Des Plaines. So I was developing a lot of really kind of good skill sets along those lines, and I kind of realized that band relationships are a complex of 3 different relationships: the artistic relationship, the interpersonal relationship, and the business relationship. And they're really complex organisms, and I'm surprised that more bands don't have therapists, but largely that was the role that I played a large part on with almost all these bands. Well, it was kind of helping them through those types of issues, but also kind of teaching them how to manage themselves. And so together we ran a couple of record labels. 5 of the 16 bands ended up signing off the major labels. Yeah. And this was in Chicago in the early 90s. And this was the time when Billboard magazine referred to North Damen and Milwaukee as the center of the music universe.
Really?
That I was fortuitous to be there right at a time this was happening. This was when, Smashing Pumpkins had just broken. Liz Phair was, had just broken in the previous year or two. I had the opportunity to release Veruca Salt's first song ever on CD in 1992-93 as a part of an independent label festival compilation. And so it was a real exciting time, and just very deeply involved in the music scene. And that lasted, probably for about 10 to 12 years from there. But as a part of that, started putting out a record label newsletter that grew into more of a major music publication called Tailspins Magazine. And then also we had an offshoot called the Zine Guide, which became the world's top independent press guide from basically 1997 to 2004.
All of these things are really good runs at really influential times.
You know what? I guess I a lot of luck, but always hard work tends to lead to that. And if anything, I'm a productaholic. I've actually, I work ever since college. I've worked 100 hours a week, and I've realized that I have the same experience as a 94-year-old person working 40 hours a week for their whole life.
It's simple math.
It's simple math. So I'm a 94-year-old man when it comes to experience.
What a way to phrase it, man.
But I do, I kind of always have a trail of product left behind. which is very frustrating to my mom because that means I always have hundreds of boxes to move whenever that has to happen. Yeah.
What is the most like pack ratty thing that you've ever gotten yourself stuck with in
campaign signs. Mayor and city council campaign signs. Those weigh a lot.
I'm aware.
Yeah. And I threw
Mine
away.
aren't small either. I get it.
I keep the metal wires though, folks. Keep the metal wires. Those are valuable.
Right.
Throw away what it says on top.
I one set that I did for the mayor one. So I did half of them with dates on them, half of them without. The ones that I did with the date, I just put them underneath so I could cut off the bottoms.
Yeah.
I digress. So but yeah, no. So campaign signs. That's a definite. I mean, do you still have like? Because I love seeing things like Will Maring and Robert Boland like pulling old Robert Boland tapes out from like the 80s or something and being like,
oh.
Here's this class. I mean, do you still have that stuff?
I have 12
around?
copies of every magazine I ever published, and there was like 45 issues between the two magazines.
Oh, that's cool.
And just also between the two record labels, we had about 35 releases, and so I have about 10 copies of all those.
Man.
Yeah.
I mean, that's your own little segment of history that
Yeah.
you get to keep a physical hold on.
Well, what's really beautiful about the Chicago music history is I took all these bands and introduced them. They didn't know each other.
Yeah.
And these people are best friends to this day.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I realized that I kind of had done at a lot of sections in my life is kind of building communities from scratch.
Yeah.
You know, much like when I moved out to Denver in 2005 to 2008.
Oh, that was before the Denver boom. Or was that like right as the Denver boom was beginning? Or what was it? You know,
well, all I know was the worst year in the mortgage industry in 40 years because I was in the mortgage industry that year.
Ooh, no. Okay.
So it was right before the Great Recession basically. And I with another gentleman I owned a cigar bar and I started producing a Thursday night open mic comedy show. And within 3 or 4 weeks, it became one of the top comedy shows on the Front Range.
You have piqued my interest yet again, Brent Ritzel. Like, we've had all of this interaction, and none of this I have known thus far, and I am thrilled that this is the thing that I love about these podcasts is the exploratory nature of the content, because I come in, like, purposefully not knowing things that I ought to know about people, because if I learn it in time and have this exacerbated, excited response to it, I hope other people have that. And you are feeding me things that are so intrinsically part of my vision that I'm like, oh hell yeah, Brent, hell yeah, man. So yeah, thank you for springing this all on.
Well, yeah, comedy's always been deeply important to me, and I think people always underestimate it and don't think about it as enough as an option of something that they would love to do.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest, other than that, I mean, comedy? I mean, especially, I didn't do stand-up myself, but I emceed, and also I coached them. I was able to take some of these folks that were absolutely atrocious and to see a Facebook posting of Rick Bryan, who I encouraged to get up there for the first time performing in Las Vegas this last week. It's that kind of stuff where, and I think always I've tried to help serve as that trim tab to give people, the faith or the confidence or the belief that they can follow their bliss.
Yeah.
It doesn't work for everyone, of course not, but at least if more people are pursuing those avenues.
Yeah. Well, and when somebody has guidance on something that they pursue in that vein, that it is easier for them to decide if it is or is not for them, right? When you provide somebody, at their own solicitation, of course, right? You're not just there saying, this is what I think about your art, this is what you should do, but somebody's receptive and saying, hey, I would really appreciate your, feelings on this, that, the other, because they're seeking critique. And then to provide them that, some people will flourish with it, and some people will, instead of lingering on it for years or decades or what have you, going, is this right or is this not? They can just go, oh, I got enough guidance to feel like maybe this isn't for me, and I'm going to move on to the next project or task or whatever that I want to go on to.
Well, one of the nice features of the show is we had metrics. People voted on their favorite comic, and somebody would win the night.
Really?
And so, yeah, they would rate each comic, from 0 to 5 or whatever. And so that would give them real tangible feedback. And so I would try to put that into more context.
Yeah.
But it really gave people important feedback. Gosh, comedy is one of the most difficult art forms that there is.
Listen, man, I've been a unfunny stand-up comedian for a solid 12 years now, and I understand. That's why I like to occupy the MC and coach position.
Yeah.
And I empathize.
See, I've never been as brave as you to actually kind of step out there.
Oh, dude, it's been rough, man. And I made a Facebook post about this a couple months ago where it's I've been doing this for over a decade, and I just now feel like I'm good. I'm not great. I'm just adequate for where I'm at. It's I'm okay with that. Right? Because also sometimes the art meets you where you are, or you meet the art where it is. And guess what? 21-year-old Nathan wasn't meant to be that kind of comedian. But when I hit 33, 35, I may be meant to be that particular kind of comedian. And I'm perfectly happy in that reserve. And eventually I will find the perfect spot for it, right? The young dad comedian where it's I'm in my 30s and I've got, driving teenagers, and here's some jokes about being just close enough to your kids to feel like you want to be cool, but you're definitely still not. It's that's, I feel like that's a sweet spot for me.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to have to find that in time.
Yeah.
Yeah. God, I love this, dude. I can't. I'm now going to bogart more of your time to do some work review and talk about a bunch of different projects and be hey, Brent, you're about to get drug into my little ecosystem here, man.
Well, I kind of think back my history back in Carbondale, and there is kind of a lot of things that I kind of helped launch.
Yeah.
Like for example, the All Species Puppet Parade too.
Ooh, yeah. Tell me about that.
That was actually born in a puppet group performance that I helped put together with Cade Bursell and Johnny Gray and other just ridiculously talented folks like that for a frack free fest.
Yeah.
And then now we did a group performance related to fracking, and that was the very first time that we all did those puppets and pulled together, and then that kind of evolved into the All Species Puppet Parade, which is an incredibly awesome, important annual event, much like the pumpkin race, which unfortunately I have nothing to do with, but I love.
Pumpkin race.
But it's stuff like that really that builds Carbondale's character.
Yeah, I agree.
And we do tend to we lack annual events.
Yeah.
We had the Irish Fest, and that's still going on, but sometimes it's located far away from Carbondale, and it's been a little bit inconsistent in that way, but we need more of those annual events.
I'll tell you a secret when the podcast is over about what we may be looking at this year.
Okay, great.
Yeah, man. No, I mean that you're absolutely right. And these one-off things, the tough part is, of course, right. There's two difficult components to a project like this, especially when they're kind of one-off, annual, biannual, semi-regular events, is one, getting them started, but two, sustaining them long-term.
Yeah.
Right? And that's something where the All Species Puppet Parade has found.
Well, it has a visionary guiding it. Yeah, Kate has always been, consistent, but also they've gotten so many great people to join in, and it's also about childhood education and engaging children in this self-expression too. All the stuff that's incredibly important.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, it is. It is ever so Carbondale. I've got to get the kids. The kids. The boy Zach. He is super into puppeting and imagine it's one thing having to live in the same town as me. Imagine having to live in the same household as me, and what that does to your psyche as a child. But they work on these characters, and they don't just parrot what the media that they consume, but they're actively building off of the identities that they try and pull out of the media that they consume, and so create their own characters. And now they need these next stages in the outlets. Just going on 11, wanting to now go from the own character in their head that then they express out themselves to, I need a character on my hand to move out as a puppet. And so yeah, Zach, I got to get him plugged in with the Sacred Puppetistas. I saw Johnny was going up to Cedarhurst today to do something.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
I'm
glad that's spreading out, and I appreciate that it skips a little bit further out than just our immediate Jackson-Williamson County area and finds its way into Mount Vernon. I think that's good. I think that's a good reach for Carbondale.
Oh, absolutely. did you study under Johnny Gray?
I did. I took several classes under Johnny, at least two that I recall offhand. One was like an intro to comm thing where it was more of a lecture hall deal. One of the others was his like 400 level comics and icons class. It was, and like, this is me as an undergrad who's got 8 other things going on in life and could care less to be in school, but it's like still showing up and like enjoying it and like contributing at like a B- level. And what I get to take away with working with all of these phenomenal folks, that one class, a student is my peer, and then the other class, that student is my instructor, right? And it's like, that's a special kind of interaction that occurs in that comm building.
Yeah. I love that department school. Whatever classification it is.
Yeah.
They just always had a lot of really great faculty members, and yeah, I can listen to Johnny talk forever. He's just full, and maybe it's it's environmental rhetoric, and that's kind of where my life is taken itself to. So it's especially meaningful.
Well, I mean, it's one of those schools, but also one of those schools underpinned by individuals like Johnny that find the intersection of performance and pedagogy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
and I've talked about this a couple times on the podcast, but I mean, that's very much it. Right. And even somebody like Brian Kelso Crow, right, who you don't sit in a classroom and think, Brian is or Dr. Crow is a performer in nature, and then like you see these things on the outside. Like I was a fan of him through Celtic Connections before I was a student in his classroom, and it was like seeing these other kids like just kind of like brush it off, and I'm sitting here going, this man's a superstar.
Yeah,
like,
you have no idea.
You don't understand what you're getting here right now. Like, this is something that you should value so much more than you do, people.
Yeah.
Anywho. Let's talk about coming back to Carbondale.
Oh yeah.
After so was the crash part of what brought you home?
No, actually, it was kind of, I'd spent 3 years in Denver, Boulder, and kind of some personal things arose that led to me having to leave. And like I said, I was talking to you earlier. I guess that's not on camera. I came back for a visit to Carbondale over Thanksgiving of 2008, and it stretched into a couple weeks because I was considering moving back to Carbondale at that time from Denver, Boulder. And the Alternative Gift Fair was happening early December, as always. This year it was at the Civic Center. And the Bucky Dome Home had a stand there. And they had some really nice, huge models, I remember especially. And I think I spent, of course, 2 or 3 hours talking to Bill Burke that whole time. And just there was a couple things kind of came up. The Fuller Dome board was looking for more members. And he basically invited me to come and join when I told him my story about having built a scale model of the Dome Home as a sophomore in high school. And then also he was a part of an energy company called Equitech International that was a consortium of 23 other companies and individuals that was developing a technology that could take any kind of organic matter and extract energy from it, with the only byproducts being a hydrogen-rich synthesis gas and water and heat. Basically, nothing toxic, without any negative emissions. And it was something, technology that had existed for about a decade or two. And so I was introduced to that company. They showed me they had some Senate testimony that they were presenting in front of Senate, and not a single sentence was legible or
digestible by your common American
senator? Written by a bunch of architects and engineers that apparently didn't have those kinds of skills. And I was a publisher and editor of my own magazines for about 15 years, and so I kind of picked up some of those skill sets. And so I kind of became their science writer. And immediately started, basically writing executive studies and business plans for a number of different projects that were completely comprehensive, completely grounded in Buckminster Fuller. When the Haiti earthquakes happened, one of our members was actually a member of Congress at that time, Walter Fauntleroy from British Washington, D.C. But anyway, we really snapped into action. We got to meet with the current prime minister and a former prime minister, and I helped to create a comprehensive plan. But there just was, you have to have people on the ground there. And anyway, that whole thing was a clusterfuck.
You're allowed to cuss. You know the deal.
Yeah. As we know, all the goods sat in, at the airports for months and months as it was.
Oh man.
That it just, and it's unfortunate, but we, it was a really incredible company. 4 of the members were veterans of the NASA Jet Propulsion Lab. Oh. So we had really serious,
brain power.
Exactly, but over the last decade, half the team has passed away, and then finally, this last January, it kind of folded. Just because of the challenges of trying to introduce new energy technologies to market. Yeah. And that's why about 6 years ago, I turned more towards solar and realized if I wanted to be in a renewable energy industry, I actually had to work with a renewable that was on market.
Yeah, I mean, and I think on market is kind of the key functionality of that, right? It's just like, sure, there may be more innovative technology stuff out there, but the reality of implementation in the modern, like global, social, what's the word? The modern global society, right, is that something just simply has to be marketable. And what marketable means is it has to be transactable from business to business and from business to the general public and from consumer to consumer as needed once ownership is kind of driven. I mean that is just how the world has become structured, right? Yep. And whether it's in a sense of capitalism, socialism, or some other form of transaction, that's just the reality of it. The transaction has to exist for any sort of implementation of larger and broader technologies to come into play.
Yep. Capitalism has its own process. 120 years ago in the United States, there was 1,000 internal combustion cars, 1,000 steam engine cars, and 1,000 electric cars. 120 years ago. One of them won out. Yeah. And one of them we're finally getting back to.
Yeah. Yeah, because, I mean, they should have been the ones that won out to begin with, right? But, that's the other flaw of the transactive system is that if you don't have, like you get back to the grad school thing, ethical players, then you don't always have what should be the ideal outcome for the society at large.
And hence Nikola Tesla's technology has been hidden from us.
Yeah.
He was 100 years ahead of where we are now.
It's
100
wild.
Years ago.
Isn't it just like disgusting of where we could and should be as humanity, and yet because of a handful of just special interests.
In 1920, he demonstrated a car that ran on a battery this size.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Imagine a 1900s that ran like the 2000s.
Yeah.
Now, I say that to understand all of the other flaws of the 1900s and how that could have been more problematic. So maybe we are not so awful being on the other side of AI and other things as we become a more equitable society globally. In many instances, not in all, obviously, but.
Well, the overall global poverty rate has dissipated a lot in the last decade. So that's.
And this goes back to the tough part of like recognizing how much further we have to go, but also acknowledging that progressivism is progress, and if you can make it happen, you have to at least acknowledge it along the way. Mm-hmm. Very
true.
Like we were talking before, and very Bill Maher. I don't want to get into
well, that was one positive message from last night. Yeah. That we have to actually celebrate wins and not see everything as a loss.
Yeah. Yep.
Without a doubt.
It's just the Neil deGrasse Tyson argument and have trying to like pin him down on UFOs. I was just like, what are you doing, man? Like,
I was really disappointed in his response. Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Really?
Oh yeah, he's grasping for straws.
to not validate UFOs.
Well, no, at least on his excuse is that it could be a equipment malfunction.
Yeah,
you know.
that's fair. That's fair. I'm not going to argue with you, man. I'm also not going to get into alien conspiracy talk quite yet. I don't know if the podcast is ready for that. I feel like after episode 300,
I don't know if
alien conspiracy conversations.
I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Stephen Greer, but he's the person responsible for the whole Disclosure Project.
No, but tell me more.
But I did spend 3 days with him in Colorado about a decade ago.
Oh, back when they were So what is up with the Denver airport, man? Like,
it's about 60 stories deep.
Okay.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
How?
Because they paid construction workers to build that, and that's why people know about it. Because those people who built those 60 levels deep below the Denver airport, are normal people that have jobs.
Like, are they offices? Is it used for anything?
I think it's.
Did you explore that wall in Denver at all?
Well, yeah, I was actually deeply involved in the paranormal.
All right, let's just go. We're here. We're going. I've opened this can of worms. Yeah, here we are.
Well, it's almost you can't avoid that when you live out there. You're an entrepreneur, and also you understand that the things are more magical than most people think.
When you're that high off the ground all of the time,
it could have to do with the lack of oxygen, but also you're closer to these entities and stuff. But I think it was just a base where they could probably send 100,000 people. Should there be massive nuclear holocaust or any other fun stuff, Type X solar flare that destroys our atmosphere or who knows? Just there's so many opportunities ahead of us.
Now I want to go scouring the internet for videos of the underground of the Denver airport.
But that was an interesting, that was a topic of discussion. And just, I knew people who knew people, I also, one of my friends was Nikola Tesla III. Who was a mechanic. It was his grandson. Because, Tesla moved out to Colorado Springs, and that's, and that's the first time he really kind of showed how you could project energy at a distance and light up all these things. And so I got to hang out with him a lot.
And his grandson just happened to be a mechanic and...
Yeah, well, he was no Nikola Tesla the first.
That's fair. That's fair.
But he was a good guy.
But it's just cool to have you're literally you then count 4 degrees of separation from Nikola Tesla exist in Brent Ritzel's life.
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah.
Just wild, man.
But
wild to live these kind of lives.
But it's always been present, and actually that's one of the reasons I did leave physics was just that the physics they're teaching in universities was not. It wasn't the deeper underlying Nikola Tesla physics. That it actually Maxwell's equations that govern electromagnetism was edited down from 16 to 4 in the second edition of a book by the two publishers, and they removed the fourth dimension in doing that. And so Maxwell's equations that govern electromagnetism are, of course, incomplete because the fourth dimension was edited out about 160 years ago. And that's part of the problem that we're having now with in any way being able to integrate what Tesla was talking about, because the mistake goes back that far.
That we built our entire, infrastructure of existence around flawed science.
Absolutely. Much like flawed buildings. Much like we build in 3 dimensions, but as Bucky also understood, we live in a 4-dimensional reality.
Yeah.
And that's where all this is connected. And where Bucky is, what freaks me out about Buckminster Fuller is he challenged the way that we build everything in our society and gave it an incredible intellectual scientific structure, and it's neither been agreed with or disagreed with.
It's just just sat there.
It's just we don't even know what to do with that.
Yeah.
And that is weird. It is very weird, especially because there's been no really good cases against it, that we keep on getting more and more information, especially as we understand how biological systems work.
Yeah.
I mean, the buckyball is a virus. This carbon-60 atom, that's the same way that, we all know that COVID looks like. I mean, that's how all viruses look like. It's the same structure of everything, even the structure of universes. And it's not 3 dimensions. There's when you talk to real physicists, of course, they'll tell you there's 27 dimensions, but just a lot of them are so small and so tightly wound into themselves, we'll never be able to access them. But
they exist.
But they do exist, and some of these do have macroscopic impacts. We do encounter places on Earth where there's physical anomalies. Where we do know certain anti-gravitational effects here and there. There's certain spots. Some people will point to Sedona, Arizona's place like that. But this was a lot more magical than I think our common narrative ever allows for.
There are people that live in Faraday cages because
yes,
they have to in this world that we've now created.
Yes,
where
and a Faraday's cage just blocks out all known electromagnetic signals.
Yeah.
But people have been able to demonstrate impacts even within Faraday cages due to these underlying, you call them virtual photons, but the underlying reality where it looks like these subatomic particles are popping in and out of existence. No, they're just traveling from higher dimensionality and passing through the 3 dimensions that we're measuring. Anyway,
no, dude. This is thrilling. This is fucking amazing. Like, I love this. I love this so much. Like, this is so where
Carbondale is.
I couldn't have. Yeah, I mean, it legitimately you question why here in this place does this conversation and this feeling and this all of these components just exist. Here, why are we an intersection of eclipses? Why are we, it's not, listen, man, it's not like anybody's trying to sit here and conspiracy theory out on stuff. We're just trying to acknowledge there are a lot of unique things occurring in tandem, and they have a particular energy about them, and it's more than just a couple crackpots hanging around town that feel that energy. It's an entire collection of people.
And they don't require a causal connection to be meaningful.
Yeah.
And that's why I've always been a big fan of Carl Jung and his notion of synchronicity, of meaningful coincidences, that we're eliminating the 4th dimension once again. We're limiting things to only this physical reality, which is a brutalization of the actual world we're surrounded by.
Yeah.
That's the challenge of language. We're unfortunately bound by it, but we absolutely need it in order to control and manage the world. But yet it also it destroys the world. It splits it up. Makes it into categories that we project onto it.
I would say that the old school architects that are in and around Carbondale have such a unique perspective on universal design because they have come of age and earned and learned themselves in this space, right? That's a very I've just barely scratched the surface of that in talking to both John and Thad.
Yeah.
Right? And it just blows my mind because the way that they think about the interwovenness of design is the way that I think about the interwovenness of social connections, right? And I don't have the mathematical capacity to think about design in a particular way just because it takes understanding the mathematics of geometry to put all that design and function together. But when I listen to them go, I'm like, this isn't how architects think the world over. There are plenty of architects and pockets around the world that think this way, but it's a very specific, unique thing occurring here.
Absolutely. Well, so many people were drawn to Carbondale because Bucky was here, and we can't underestimate this, how there's a deep background of comprehensivists, and you find people that have skill sets in a lot of different realms, and that's not that we're completely unique in that, but we kind of are, just because this area has really kind of attracted those people, and musicians especially seem to be attracted to Bucky, and artists more so than engineers and architects, unfortunately. They're kind of a little bit behind the curve when it comes to understanding and embracing Bucky.
Yeah.
It took a Harvard business professor, Edmondson, to write a book to explain, Bucky's mathematics.
Really?
Yeah. So that's, yeah. There's not enough of that, and that's actually, kind of what one of my missions. Hopefully, is to continue to teach and share Bucky in digestible ways. I was a member of the board for 3 years, from 2009 to 2011. I was president of the board during that time, and then I went on to produce the Fuller Future Festival for about 7 years.
Yep.
With folks like Elizabeth Donahue and Beth Martell and other awesome folks like that.
I may still have a couple pieces floating around this building somewhere to give back to you.
Oh, from the art show.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
okay, yeah.
I just assumed that those things would have been mixed into Fuller Fest as well as part of your collection of things.
Well, yeah, and then part of what I hope to and plan on launching eventually is the Museum of Livingry, because I've been collecting Bucky stuff now for 15 years and have just kind of a ridiculous collection. Yeah, also include local artists doing portraits of Bucky. That I've been kind of collecting those too, and looking forward to having some more of those types of events.
It's good.
And stuff.
Good.
But we just, we need more Bucky education. And
what did you bring with you?
Well, what I brought was a critical path. This is
so perfectly positioned in front of the camera. You got it.
Nice. This is Bucky's seminal work, and basically any copy that showed up on eBay in the last 15 years that's been under $12, I've purchased. So I have about 300 of these, and I want to start distributing them.
That's
for free.
Awesome. Okay, lean it back just a little bit. Yep, there you go. It has a little bit of sheen from the light. So you've got 300 copies.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
And I want to start distributing them both to individuals that want to read Bucky's seminal work, and especially kind of classrooms. If there's teachers out there that has a full class, that would be ideal.
Yeah.
To get it distributed to them. And I figured this is probably the best opportunity for me. This is the Bucky stuff I'm doing now.
Yeah.
Is I just want to get more of his words out there. I'm trying to get all of the books of Bucky in the world here locally to distribute to our local community.
I am finally flipping the switch on the WTF Carbondale news site. I have I'm getting ready to execute a contract with a designer. I'm making the moves on it. I would like this to be one of the first articles.
Oh my gosh. Fantastic, yeah, and this is.
I mean, just telling this story
and
just having a little piece to go along with it. I think this is exactly the type of launch content that evolution in the platform needs.
Wow, no, that's incredible, because I think it's the right time.
Yeah.
Just because things are really together with the Dome now.
Yeah.
Things are really going strong with SIU, with Elizabeth's efforts there. And there really is, a real solid nexus forming. I wrote some other grants for the Fuller Dome, and just kind of pointing out the fact, that type of place could expect to have upwards of 25,000 visitors a year if it has the proper type of reception center, which would add an extra $4 million a year to the local economy.
That's crazy.
And those are the type of opportunities that we all need to get on the same team about.
Yep. They are positioned throughout town, right? Yes, obviously the Dome Home is one of the more notable instances of that, but these pockets of attractions throughout town exist and could be tied together or stand alone separately, or kind of do a mix of standalone and tie together to achieve really what this draw that folks want to have. I mean, even now, right, that Gary and Mike are going out and talking, like they're, one of their interviews on WSIU maybe a month and a half ago was like, now that things are going to open back up, we want to really kick into high gear on tourism things and drawing people here. And it's like, there's a difference between a mural district drawing people and an actual experiential history that exists to draw people. Every small town in America has a historic downtown that you should come see. But then there's also just a historic town full of modern stories that you can still exist with the living individuals that underpin the actuality of those stories, and you should come experience in Carbondale if you're interested in anything from media to technology to design to social justice to whatever it may be. Right? These are all things that are very they are very forward in modern society now as part of the conversation of existence, and it just happens to be that Carbondale pulls all of these things together in a very small place that's very accessible to any number of people.
It's the most diverse town of its size in the United States.
And when we say diverse, we don't just mean diverse in the sense of there are
100
other
countries
people
live
other
here.
than just white people here.
No, 100 countries live here. And that's the magic of growing up here. I had a different friend from a different nation each year because they kept moving until I finally connected with the Fangs at China House, and that became my second family for like junior high and high school.
Oh, that's phenomenal.
Yeah, those are so many of my memories revolve around serving egg rolls out of there on Halloween. We do 1,000 over the weekend. And
oh my God! So tell me. So here's the deal. Tie me up on the Bucky Dome work that you put in, because that's one of the things that Thad pushed me on. He was like, Brent did so much to like kickstart this project again and get it going the right way. Like, you got to have him on. So that's one component. And then let's close out on serving egg rolls on Halloween. Okay. I think that's a beautiful way to tie it all together.
Well, and actually, Elizabeth Donahue caught it really well that she's like, I want that plastic off the dome. And I literally remember her coming and saying, what do I have to do to get that plastic off that dome? And then she got involved, but realizing that she had all these other skill sets when it came to development and stuff, that we brought her on board as a development director. And so that was a big piece of the puzzle was really the nonprofit making that commitment that we're going to take this seriously enough that we're going to hire somebody to make this happen. And in 2011 there was so much going on. We had the Fuller Dome Transformation Initiative, and it was a huge event where we brought in a half a dozen of the top Bucky's students and friends. His daughter Allegra, that was the first of 2 times I helped bring her back into Carbondale. Also, Thomas Zung, Medard Gable. That's who Bucky went and spent the last decade of his life with out in Philadelphia. Was Medard Gable. We had them all here. We had a 5-day event. We had someone that wrote an original Bucky play that was performed at the event, and we just had, it really put the need to transform the dome on the map. But there was always this challenge because a lot of people over the previous decade had given money. Yeah. And so a big part of what we did was, we took down this highly dangerous redwood fencing, only dangerous because there was a lot of nails sticking out of it. And we
just natural defenses. No.
Well, when I did join the board, the place did look like a construction site, and that was inappropriate. And so we really spent a lot of the next 2 or 3 years cleaning it up. But then also we reached out and found the Save America's Treasures grant, and we actually were able. The first time we wrote it and entered it, we won it, and it was $125,000. And as Elizabeth so rightly noted, some of the board members were like,
matching time.
We have to match that?" But the thing is, there's so much volunteer labor going in that it was a no-brainer, especially Thad, who's donated 12 years of architectural services. God bless you,
That matches pretty well for that amount of money.
That really, there was always a kind of a lot of work being done that we could capitalize on and hold as matches, and it really did work out. We got the external, we got it put into dry, we got that done, and so that kind of created the peace of mind where I could step away and then they could focus on the innards. Yeah. Which is not as sexy to raise money for.
Dude,
but by any stretch, it's just a lot more difficult.
Yeah, people like to give money to the flash boom baha.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? They like the ooh and the ah and the nameplate out front and all this other, but there's so much more functional stuff that needs the money up front. And it's just tough to get people to sign on for the boring stuff.
Yeah, and it is hard. Most people on Carbondale boards aren't necessarily geared towards fundraising, but literally that's kind of why most boards exist. And I encourage everyone out there that if you're joining a board, just help them raise money, because that's really that's.
And it doesn't matter if it's a lot of money or a little bit of money. No. It's just like it's the three T's, right? Time, talent, treasure.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
and contribute of those what you have.
Yep.
Like, you know, I don't fundraise a lot in this space, but like I've got talents and I've got time to put into it. I figure for being broke in 30s, like, you know, that's reasonable.
Yeah.
Like maybe I'll have money or know people with money in 10 or 15 years to shake the money tree. But until then, youthful energy dumped in buckets into a project and see if it works.
It helps a lot.
It's what it takes, man.
Yeah, it does. Being a cheerleader is sometimes all that people need you to be.
Say that one more time.
Being a cheerleader is sometimes all that people need you to be. And I find I have much like you, you remind me a lot of myself in terms of really having that skill set down. But, you know, not a lot of people can generate optimism in any situation.
Oh, dude. And it's like the other side of it is the optimism without the toxic positivity. Like I'm so over, dude. If I had a nickel for every time somebody was like, well, that WTF Carbondale and it's negative, and it's like, because you don't pay attention to the context of the entire project and the amount of influence that it's meant to have over the public conversation as a whole, and from there what we can derive of value as a community from our interaction together online.
It is onlining people moving into Carbondale immediately into our culture and immediately into friendships.
Yeah.
People are not really looking at it if they're not getting it. Also, just where do I get my nails done?
Yeah.
I mean, that's probably the number one question and one of the most important questions, and it gets answered a dozen times over each time, and it's wonderful.
Yeah.
Nothing existed like that.
And even like, and it was never right. It was never intentional. Like it was just, you know, the issue was Facebook was moving away from, you know, page value, which had been in decline since 2013. Like I remember like the late October, November timeline in 2013 when the switch flipped and your organic reach on a Facebook page was cut down to a tenth of what it would have been if you could just reach the people that follow your page. That was when Facebook really started pushing to their monetization of the platform. And it's taken from then to really about a year ago, year and a half or so, for them to start pushing the focus off onto groups and the interaction between individuals in a single space, almost as a forum or a board, as opposed to like a broadcast scenario where, you know, a business fires up a Facebook page or an organization fires up a Facebook page and they push. Mm-hmm. I mean, even now you see any advertising that Facebook does, it's pointed towards their groups and joining and engaging in community, because that's how they keep people locked in.
Absolutely.
You know, and from there, you know, for me, it's understanding that, you know, I've always been active in digital spaces since I was a kid. Now, for me, a kid, you know, is the early 2000s, you know, late 90s, what have you, being tens and teens and really like being that first entirely formed by digital communication generation. And I don't even know where the hell I'm going with all this, Brent. I don't mean to. But it is just to say that the group is meant to represent the physical happenings of what's going on the ground, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, cool. Well, yeah, sure, people come in and ask like business questions, but they also come in and the lost animals thing and the apartments and housing stuff and the general business talk and the community discussion just in general and the events and activities, or something funny like posting a picture of a beaver and being like, whose dog is this? Like, it's just stuff that I because it's all Carbondale.
Or Sandy Laticki making sure we know about everything awesome going on.
Everything. I have people ask me how much I, like jokingly, but ask me how much I pay Sandy Laticki to post in that group. And I'm just like, this is just, Sandy has taken this on as her own personal project, and it makes the group so much more valuable.
It really does.
Yeah.
She's in my mom's sorority. They're in a sorority together.
Oh,
and
perfect.
I just kind of pointed out how important she is with her local social media postings.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, it's thank you, Sandy.
Yeah, seriously. I've asked her to be on the podcast. She hasn't responded to that email yet. But we'll get around to it. We'll get her warmed up to it.
Oh yeah.
And she just when I bumped into her a couple weeks ago as well. Same time I was talking to Judy about needing to organize the Buckminster Fuller stuff here. Her It is all with the purest of intent. She's not like coming out there to wallpaper over something because she thinks that the platform is bad and the interactions are bad or whatever. Like, she's legitimately contributing, like providing full value with like an earnest heart about it.
Yeah.
And it's just so like, and Ange Kavinskis, without seeing her name, I can't pronounce it off the top of my head, but she's friends of the library board and other stuff. And just maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, I told her, hey, please post more stuff in the group related to Friends of the Carbondale Library and a couple other things. That's content I really welcome and, is valuable here. And like, she's now like started to kind of follow along Sandy's same path. And it's like, cool.
Yeah.
If I can develop a couple more of those folks, there will never be a want for questioning what is going on in Carbondale. They will always have presented it up front and in person. And what I tried to explain to Scott Thorne on episode 55 of the podcast was like, I see this as all self-reporting. Right? This to me is what modern news is. That is the people existing in place telling you what's going on from their immediate perspective with a very like limited filter on that activity.
It's what Jello Biafra told us all to do, become the media.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now it's so easy.
Yes.
And it's now each of our responsibilities.
Yes.
Don't become the media. I mean, you are the media. Own it. Is more of the reality now.
Well, and folks need guidance on how to do it ethically. Mm-hmm. Right? Like not everybody's not like this just happens to be my skill, right? Like I don't have the architectural and design skill. I don't understand healthcare. I don't this, that, the other, right? I understand this modern concept of we are our own media. And if I can provide guidance along that line, then that's my purpose, right? Because people need to get up to speed on that. And if they don't, then they get duped by things like the rip-off kid from West Frankfort, Franklin County News or whatever, that steals and repurposes news content from other news organizations locally and then just like really poor reporting on other activity. But because he's built this audience of like, digitally illiterate followers in many instances, like he's been able to like infiltrate like legitimate people with his content to make him think that he's a legitimate news source when he's not. Mm-hmm. And like, it's just people need this type of digital literacy, not just like told to them like, hey, here's what this is, but like guided through it with like a clear description of it along the way.
People need to be taught and trained how to read media.
Yeah.
Is kind of the point, and that's not happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Very true. Very true.
It's a skill set. I'm not saying I'm like perfect at any of this by any means, but it's like I feel like I've got just the right amount of like citizen experience to pass this along to other folks and hope that they can shape their own vision and version out of it. Mm-hmm. And I'm sorry, dude, I have taken up too much of this podcast with my own yicking and yakking today, but it's just when I get into what feels like a nice game of soft game of ping pong back and forth. That's how some of these podcasts work out.
Well, we don't talk enough, Nathan.
Yeah, we do, and the podcast tells me that we clearly need to talk so much more, Brent. So let's close this out on your egg roll slinging Halloween stories, because you remember the good Halloweens.
Oh, well, yeah, my gosh. And growing up in that context, I mean, there was just Carbondale's a great place to grow up as a kid.
Yeah.
Because there's so many things that you get to access at the university with, Dennis Fang was Carmen Fang owned China House, and she had 3 boys, Dennis, Ben, also known as Ping, and James. And they were my second family growing up. We started off on a little league team together, me and Dennis. Mm-hmm. Calvin Scott, a worker for the city, to work the roads for the city, was our baseball coach. And one year we finished 0-16, I remember. But and we were either Carbondale Concrete or Lee and Hilliard. We were all sponsored by some kind of road construction type of organization. Nice. But that's where I met Dennis. We were on the same little league team together. And, after games, we'd go get ice cream. And then after one game, Dennis is like, hey, why don't we go to my parents' place, China House? We're like, what? Let's do that.
Yeah.
And so anyway, he was really my best friend throughout junior high and high school. And starting in junior high, I started helping out during the Halloween parties when there was 20, 30,000 people on the strip, just with the most amazingly creative costumes that you could ever fathom.
Oh my gosh!
And
the piece that Adam Fletcher unearthed from 1980s the other day.
Yes. That was incredible because that was one of the years I was there serving egg rolls, and we wouldn't let anybody in, but the front door was basically a big vat of egg rolls that we were selling out, and we do 1,000 over that weekend.
Oh gosh!
And it was a great way to
walk up, give you however much money, you hand them an egg roll, and they're on their way.
And it's such a safe way to kind of experience that as a 12 or 13-year-old too. Kind of being able to see everybody, but not, But of course, I would, walk through the crowd up and down for hours too.
Yeah.
Because it was a trip.
Yeah, and it was. You're generally safe enough to just meander about the crowd and you'd be fine.
I only remember one thing ever being thrown. And it was a shame. That a university and a city couldn't work together to maintain something that was our biggest economic weekend of the year every year.
Yeah.
Just really, really lack of forethought with that. And it's just almost as if no other town can throw a party because there's no way to manage it.
Yeah.
It's like, no, but wait, they all do.
Yeah.
It just seems
you
like
shut down some roads and you have a party, man. That's guess what, man? Streets aren't only meant for cars.
No, they're and I know we do have a challenge. We're quadrisected by two state highways.
Yeah.
There's a complexity with that, and there's a great limitation, unfortunately. But yeah, that was that's what people talk about, the 70s and 80s and how things were, and I guess 1990 was the year that a number of students started going down for the first time, 91, and that's. I left in '86 to go to college, but yeah, soon after that, really the decline started, I think. And I did come back during middle
it's
of
all
my.
your fault.
What's that? All my fault.
You pulled yourself out of the Jenga pile. It all started to come crumbling down. No.
I did come back freshman year for one last Halloween.
There you go.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, that was. Maybe that's why I'm also so focused on just needing these huge annual events, because growing up as a kid, all of my memories are around those.
Yeah.
Springfest. I have a memory of a Springfest that the entire theme was potatoes, and they kept on playing the B-52's Private Idaho, and there was mashed potato wrestling, and I can't find anybody else that has any recollection of that. But I swear that happened in the Quad one year, that it was the Springfest was just one massive potato festival, and everything was potatoes. If anybody else remembers that, please, post
Let
that.
Brent know about Potato Fest.
That I didn't just dream that.
Make him not crazy. No.
The mashed potato wrestling was incredible. It should be done every year.
And beyond just the one-off activity that occurs during an annualized event that has notoriety regionally, sectionally or nationally, whatever it may be, it acts as its own marketing platform for just general everyday activity, right? Like, to be known as this place for this thing then draws people in general who simply are attracted to a place for a particular thing because they think, this is just kind of the place where my people are, and maybe I should be there.
The Cardboard Boat Regatta,
great example.
First one ever launched. Now there's thousands of them. Thank goodness it's still going. Has that happened yet? Is that on your radar at all?
I should definitely be doing a podcast about, like, if there are people around that started the Cardboard Boat Regatta.
Well, Larry Bush helped start it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So he also will have some early stuff to say about the Fuller Dome.
All right, perfect.
Yeah, from the year 2000 to 2010.
I just love how this has started to, like, spiral, like, into so much, like, the podcast just turns into, you got to talk to this person about this thing next, and now, like, this is the interwoven component that I wanted this project to, like, have.
Well, you're helping to manifest some things that are now going to happen that wouldn't have happened without pulling all these folks together for these podcasts.
Yeah, we'll see. That's all
without a
can
doubt.
say.
I wouldn't be here talking about free copies of Critical Path for whoever wants them. Seriously. I will deliver. There's only one Brent Ritzel on planet Earth, so I'm easy to Google. If you find another, kill him because he's an imposter. Thank you.
We didn't have the imposter on this episode of the WTF Carbondale podcast, however. We had the real Brent Ritzel for episode 70, of which I'm sure he will be back for maybe an episode 140. We'll just see how this goes. You can't see him, but he's doing a little dance of joy at this moment, because this is just how this goes. The WTF Carbondale podcast. We talk to interesting people about their interesting lives, tie it all back to this little old place we call home, and just love living our lives.
Amen, sir.
Have a good one, folks. Whatever that one may be.